Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another FP&A Trends Webinar. Today, we are going to talk about digital FP&A, but from the point of view of key steps to foster culture, data-driven culture. My name is Larissa Melnichuk. I'm Managing Director and Founder of FP&A Trends Group and International FP&A Board. Today we have more than 450 registrations from 60 countries from around the globe. Welcome. The main mission of FP&A Trends Webinar is to share the latest trends and developments in modern FP&A. Very quickly, update on agenda. So today we are going to look at data-driven FP&A, what are the key issues and solutions. We will look at 8 forces for data-driven FP&A. We will look at some practical examples from practitioner and what is the role of technology in fostering a data-driven culture. Of course, we will have an opportunity for conclusions and recommendations, and Q&A session will be there as well. Now is the time for a quick introduction. Again, we have international panel from North America and from Europe, and I would like to ask my panelists to switch on the cameras and to join us, please. Quick introductions. Fantastic. So let me start from you. Gary Calkins, many of you know Gary, so from his books, from his talks, definitely a thought leader in analytics and author of many books. Gary based in United States, and he is internationally recognized expert, speaker, about EPM and CPM systems, and he's a founder of analytics-based performance management organization. But also he is so much well known on activity-based costing, one of the founders of those concepts. And those are the latest books from Gary. Gary, we are so happy to have you here. Welcome.
My privilege. Thank you very much, Larissa.
Thank you so much. And Gary today will talk about the driving forces of data-driven FP&A. Now, I would like to introduce to you Nahuel Rosas Delpit, who is joining us from Paris, France. Nahuel is a member of our Paris FP&A board, and he's finance director and head of FP&A EMEA at Medtronic. Many of you had Nahuel's presentation just recently. He presented on a different subject. And he's leading FP&A team at Medtronic and responsible for whole EMEA region. And of course, data-driven FP&A, it's so high in agenda. And today, Nahuel will share with us the latest insights. So what is happening? Nahuel, you're welcome.
Thank you, Larissa. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. And our final speaker is Jacob Joseph, who is Director Product and Technology at Profix Software. Jacob is based in Canada, and he currently leads technical product management, user experience, data science, and cloud operations in his company. He's a very experienced analytical and technology leader, and today he's going to talk about how technology can help to drive analytical culture, data-driven culture. Jacob, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Now you can switch off your cameras because I have just a few opening slides for everyone. I would like to remind you about my background, based in the UK, just outside of London. I'm British qualified accountant, Fpma. I always worked in FP&A as a practitioner, leading FP&A for Europe and for some companies globally as well. And for the last 7 years, I was working separately, leading my own company. It was my interest in the FP&A journey where we established chapters in 27 cities, 16 countries, 4 continents. Every single chapter I visited by myself, and I was facilitating those discussions. At FP&A Trends Group, we also have advisory service, and of course, there are a lot of insights. Please join us. This is 1 hour webinar. Your participation is welcome. We will have 2 polling questions and you can easily participate, easily vote. There will be interactive Q&A session at the end, but you can start sending your questions straight away via chat box. Presentation is available right now in handouts, but also you will receive both recording and presentation within 2 days after the meeting. And after the meeting, there will be survey if you can stay and if you can share with us your feedback, how we can be better. Before we start, I would like to say thank you so much to Profix, our sponsor for today, the company that provides flexible FP&A solution. Thank you so much, Profix, for sponsoring this event. Very quick introduction into the subject, as I normally do. Really would like to share with you some data-driven issues and solutions that we observe in FP&A Trends Group. The latest survey we finalized just recently, 2021 survey. Amazingly, 40% of organizations, they reported that data they use at the moment, they are low or poor quality. 48% of companies still plan by this traditional method, last year plus 2% or minus 5%. 26% of the companies, they have received no technology investment in the last 5 years. And of course, there are so many things happened. So a lot of Excel, obviously. And only 7% of those respondents, they are happy with their current situation, with their FP&A. 93 are not. And one of the biggest problem is data. This is actually a comparison of our surveys for the last 3 years. Amazingly, when we ask people what are the biggest problems in FP&A, over 60% of responses consistently for the last 3 years, it was those problems that are connected with data, you see? So you can see data, such a single source of truth, it's not timely, it's too complex, and so on and so forth. But when we look at data-driven FP&A or digital FP&A, very often it's not only technology, isn't it? It's data-driven culture. And I like this quote, a quote from David Waller, the business obstacles to create database business aren't technical, they are definitely cultural. And then to start today's meeting, I would like very quickly update you on our view on what are these 9 pillars of data-driven FP&A implementation. Of course, it starts from sponsorship from the top. But also, this is the work of data scientist, and not the classical one, but FP&A data scientist, who is the bridge between finance and data science. We discussed this on many of our meetings, and this is emerging a very interesting role. It's also all about key business drivers. We can't use data all together, and we can't use thousands of drivers, but in reality, it's 20-80 principles to find those that are key drivers. And of course, here is the work of FP&A architect, another very important role. Not the classical system accountant or modeler in Excel. FP&A architect creates the whole infrastructure, the whole technological infrastructure for the company, and of course collaborates with IT and data scientists as well. So driver-based model, this is the responsibility, and of course implementing this through integrated planning platform. Access to key FP&A data, it's important. So all of those key stakeholders to have easy access to FP&A key data, but also insights as well. Collaborative scenario planning, this is the way how we manage uncertainty. And of course, storytelling. This is the way how we implement, how we facilitate the decision-making process. So those are the updates from me. But now I would like to ask Gary Calkins to switch on the camera. Gary, it's about your presentation, those driving forces, 8 forces for data-driven FP&A. Gary, you're welcome. The stage is yours.
Great, thank you. So let's go to my first slide. I always enjoy this cartoon, drowning in data, but starving for information. You have this poor beleaguered clerk, sad, shoulders hunched, paper all around him, and the supervisor in the doorway to the left is asking him, looks like you've got all the data. What is the holdup? I gave you the request this morning. How come you don't have the answer this afternoon? And the message here is there's a difference between data and information. Data typically is transactional, payroll systems, and like you convert data into information. So next slide. The reason I want to have these 8 forces is because FP&A methods have been around for decades, some arguably even before computers. So why is there interest in it? I'll quickly go through these 8. The first is executive frustration with strategy failure. Most executives are quite good at formulating strategy. Their big frustration is failure to successfully implement it. There's actually a fair amount of empirical evidence. There's a Chicago-based, and I'm a native of Chicago, consulting firm that monitors the involuntary turnover of CEOs in North America. It's increasing every year. And I think the reason is post-Enron, board of directors no longer ceremonial. If a CEO is not basically implementing the strategy, then they are terminated. Carly Fiorini at Hewlett Packard is a good example. Number 2, increased accountability. Today, there is no place to hide. Managers and employee teams will be monitored. They will be measured. It doesn't necessarily mean their jobs are at risk, but it could adversely impact their promotability, promotions, salary increases. Number 3, more rapid decision making. Unlike a few years ago when you could test and learn and have meetings in conference rooms, today people will be on the phone, go or no go, yes or no. They have to make decisions in near real time. They almost wish an executive was sitting next to them and said, what decision should I make that aligns with your strategy? And incidentally, back to number 1, how do you solve this? The how is through the strategy map and balance scorecard. Many of you are familiar with Professor Robert S. Kaplan, Harvard Business School, and Dr. David Norton. That is basically one of the many good, effective techniques for strategy management, strategy implementation. All right, number 4, mistrust of the management accounting system for accuracy and transparency. The reality is most managers do not trust the management accounting system. I'm not talking about external financial reporting. That's for statutory compliance with government regulatory agencies. I'm talking about the management accounting system for insights and decisions. And the reason they don't trust it is because of those overhead allocations. Most accountants allocate costs, if you will, product service lines, like spreading butter across bread. They use factors in manufacturing like number of labor hours, or in other businesses, number of sales amount, units produced, square feet, square meter, head count. None of those allocation factors reflect the unique consumption relationship that the services and products basically consume of those expenses. So what's the how-to, the solution? Activity-based costing. And I know many of you say, oh, ABC, it's too big, it's too complicated. That was a problem in the 1970s and 80s. There are techniques now to implement ABC in 2 to 3 weeks, right-sizing them. Number 5, poor customer value management. Customers are the source of value creation for financial wealth creation of shareholders and owners. And the problem is many, if you will, customers view their suppliers as offering commodities. Banks all have the same type of depository accounts and the like. Therefore, for a supplier to be competitive, they need to provide differentiated services to different segments of customers. Not all of them are doing it well. And the CFO has to basically help out. They need to basically calculate not just up to the product gross profit margin line, but include the expenses below the line, channel distribution expenses, selling expenses, marketing expenses, customer service expenses, to create basically a profit and loss statement for each customer. Because the sales and marketing teams are always asking the question, which type of customer is most attractive to retain, to grow, to win back and acquire? Which types are not? How much should we spend? Price discounts, coupons, offers, and deals. Number 6, contentious budgeting, poor resource capacity planning. This may surprise you. I think the annual budget process is broken. It's out of date in a couple of months after it's published, caves into the loudest voice and strongest muscle. Those veteran, managers know how to sandbag it. And that technique of spreadsheets, incrementing it 1 or 2% for inflation, whatever, And then when you give it to the executives, they don't like that number, go change the number. So you change it up, down, up, down, up, down. You almost wish the executive tell me what number did you want in the first place. However, the FP&A methods are more volume sensitive. This is my industrial engineering, I think, second semester, freshman year at Cornell University. You basically have to do capacity planning. There's the formula. The forecast volume and mix of the products and services times the unit level cost consumption rate equals the capacity required, the number of type of employees with their salary and wages, spending with suppliers. So you need to think like an engineer. 7, dysfunctional supply chain management. This may not apply to everybody unless you're in the supply chain, but the issue is this. Most customers view their suppliers as the enemy. It's an adversarial relationship. They will pound on their supplier to negotiate lower prices. If they put the supplier out of business, so what? We can always get another supplier. That's got to stop. It needs to be a marriage of all the trading partners along the supply chain, because supply chains are competing against other supply chains for share of wallet, share of purse. So they need to collaborate to identify mutually beneficial projects and initiatives that will save money for both trading partners, all the trading partners. And finally, number 8, unfulfilled return on investment promises from large IT systems like enterprise resource planning systems, ERP, or customer relationship management systems. And the issue here is, if you ask an IT director, chief information officer, 3 years after they just finished implementing a large ERP system, if you ask them, how well do you believe the return on investment met or exceeded what that ERP software salesman sold you on 3 years ago, many of them will be hard pressed to say yes. They'll say, golly, we just spent 3 years putting this thing in. I'm not sure we've got the payback. That does not mean you should not implement it. You must implement ERP systems to remain competitive. But the problem is they produce a lot of data, but not necessarily the information. And we basically, when we talk about being data driven, we're really talking about using that data to convert it to information for insights and making better decisions. Remember this, in the absence of facts, anybody's opinion is a good one. In the absence of facts, anybody's opinion is a good one. But usually the biggest opinion wins, which is the opinion of the boss of the boss of the boss. So to the degree they're making decisions on gut feel or intuition or flawed and misleading information, the organization is at risk. So that's my message, Larissa.
Gary, thank you so much. Excellent message. Excellent 8 forces that drive interest in FP&A, especially the need for rapid decision making. It's important, isn't it? I would like to ask our panelists to switch on the cameras and just a quick discussion before we go to the practical insights. Nahuel, what would be your commentary or question?
Thank you. So first, I'd like to say that I really liked the cartoon, Gary, and I was impressed by the very structured overview. So definitely many of the 8 factors sound very familiar to me, so spot on. I maybe add that the pandemic is also forcing the organizations lately to adapt to a new normal, to a never normal, high levels of volatility, uncertainty, and in this context, extracting more value from all the data available is definitely becoming critical. So Gary, while you were studying these 8 forces, can I ask you, what has been your major learning?
The major lesson learned by organizations I have worked with has nothing to do with technology or software or methods. It's about people. And the issue is resistance to change. Do not underestimate how much resistance to change. People love the status quo. Only babies like change, changing diapers. And there are these barriers. In addition to resistance, there's fear of knowing the truth or other departments knowing the truth. There's fear of being measured. There's fear of being held accountable. Weak leadership, not every executive team's got the highest IQ. So the real lesson is you need to have some expertise with change management, behavioral change management, and most people don't have degrees in sociology or psychology. They're all what I call Newtonians, like Isaac Newton. To them, the world's a big machine. Give me the levers, pulleys, dials. You need to have some Darwinian, like Charles Darwin. It's an organism, sense and respond. So the lesson learned is you're going to need to use some behavioral change management techniques to get buy-in and support to proceed to implement these methods.
Thank you, cannot agree more.
Thank you so much, Gary. Excellent insights. And Jacob, what would be your quick commentaries, please?
Sure. So I think the forces themselves resonate really, really well for not just us, like as a company, but when I speak to folks in the FP&A groups, very, very similar. And I think the thing I love the most is that a lot of these problems that we're facing, even though they're cultural based, could be solved with technology. It's a small piece, but it's an important piece to kind of limit the pain for each person.
Excellent. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you so much, Gary, for your presentation. Now we would like to hear from our participants. There are many of you here, and we would like to understand what are the most valuable, most important forces for you, for your company, for data-driven FP&A. I'm launching the polling question right now. And when you see this polling question, if you can choose one of those that it most resonates for you. So which of FP&A forces resonate most for you? The first one is executive frustration with strategy failure. The next one is mistrust in management accounting system for accuracy. The next one is poor customer value management, contentious budgeting process, poor resource capacity planning, and unfulfilled return on investment promises from large IT systems. So please, can you continue to vote? Just a few seconds, I can see that more than 50% of you voted. So just a few seconds and we are closing the poll and we are sharing the results with everyone. We are sharing the results and I would like to ask Gary to comment on this. So the biggest problem actually at the moment, it's contentious budgeting process. 36% of people said that is the biggest problem. And the second one is mistrust of managerial accounting system for accuracy. Gary, what would be your commentary, please?
Well, those two add up to almost 60%, and they both involve the management accounting system. So I think it basically creates an advocation activity-based costing, which applies to the vast majority of organizations that have repetitive processes, is really mandatory. Because for the accuracy, if you don't do ABC and you do the butter spreading, some of the products are overcosted, the others must be undercosted. So it's a zero-sum error game. That means the CFO is providing flawed and misleading information to their managers. For the budgeting, for you to basically do driver-based, if you will, capacity planning, you need those unit level cost consumption rates that are calibrated from the ABC system and then applied in the multiplication. So this does not surprise me that 60% involve the management accounting system.
Thank you so much, Gary, for your commentaries. I'm hiding the results. And this is the time for us now to look at the next site. Nahuel, I would like you to join us for this presentation. This is the learnings from practical case. And we have Nahuel here, who is Finance Director, Head of FP&A at Medtronic, joining us from Paris. Nahuel, you are welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thanks again for having me, Larissa, and again, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. So we can move to the first slide. So I am starting with this quote by Dr. Albert Einstein. As today, I will try to highlight the important changes required in an organization to truly shift to a data-driven culture. Next slide, please. So first observation is that in many cases, when we think about data, either we focus on data access matters. Where can I find this report? Please give me access to this data. Please create this new report for me. Either we focus on data integrity. And very often we hear such things as, I don't recognize these numbers. They don't reconcile with the ones I have. Or what is the source of your numbers? Or You cannot look at my business performance in this way. These metrics do not apply to me. I assume this sounds familiar. And certainly data access, data integrity are important challenges to solve. That's clear. But a data-driven culture goes beyond this. Next slide, please. So indeed, beyond data access and beyond data integrity, an organization with a data-driven culture is an organization that takes decisions truly informed by data. And this in all company aspects, from the day-to-day operations to the strategic plans and through management initiatives. So I know it sounds pretty obvious, but interestingly, lots of decisions continue being taken based on intuition, based on feelings. And very often, when we look for data, if we think about it, we do it to understand the impact of decisions that were already made. So when preparing for this meeting, I actually saw a report from 2018 by McKinsey Global Institute stating that a data-driven organization is 23 times more likely to turn prospects into customers, 6 times more likely to retain them, and 19 times more likely to generate a profit as a result. So with such great results, I think it's fair to ask why organizations are still lagging behind in terms of data management. And Gary, you said it clearly earlier. A big roadblock is simply resistance to change. Next slide, please. So I would like to illustrate this with 2 situations I have experienced over the last 18 months, which relate to planning in times of COVID. So interestingly, as I was mentioning earlier, the COVID pandemic forced us to accelerate our journey towards more data-driven decisions. To make it very simple, until April 2020, my main reference point was my company annual operating plan. We were analyzing variances against it, making recommendations on corrective actions to mitigate risks against plan. And in the context of the pandemic, looking at the annual operating plan all of a sudden became really irrelevant. We wanted to understand our weekly performance. We needed to understand if we were seeing signs of recovery. We needed more insights about our own trends. We wanted to understand how the different COVID waves would impact us. So looking for a lot of data. And we first did a lot of ad hoc work, trend analytics. We asked our colleagues from the different countries for insights. We started with Italy because this is where the COVID impacted first in Europe. And we got a lot of interesting learnings, but fast, it represented a lot of manual work. So we then decided to accelerate on a couple of existing initiatives internal in the company to have sales predictive analytics on a digital platform. We also worked at building a source of truth for the epidemiology insights with different scenarios in terms of waves, in terms of hospital capacity. And all of this was provided by an external data institute, so basically objective insights. So at the end of the day, everybody worked really hard. We did a lot of progress, but we fast faced this resistance to change. The predictive analytics were seen as a black box, and there were conflicting opinions on how to read the epidemiology insights. So I won't cover all the discussions and challenges we went through, but what I would like to highlight is that I really saw a moment when dynamics changed. And this is simply when our corporate team started using the predictive analytics report, and this at the top of the organization. And more importantly, they started raising questions based on it. And naturally, this drove immediate adoption. Our leaders starting using this report as a source of truth, accepting it might not be perfect, but still directionally correct. So in a way, the whole organization got forced to use this data, and now a few months later, it is a well-established standard. And same for the epidemiology analytics. Leaders started bringing in clinical experts, people who have authority to interpret the data and make recommendations. And this solved most of the discussions around data integrity. So with these two situations, I want to highlight that in addition to data access, it's critical to have sponsoring from top management and to position data experts as partners. Next slide, please. So my learnings and key takeaways. First, it is important to have the basics right. Data quality, data integrity, that definitely requires a lot of effort in terms of stewardship, but it's the only way to build a robust foundation. And it's also important to provide easy access to key metrics and to have a couple of solid standard reports. Second, it's critical that top management embraces the change and leads by example. Senior leaders need to show how they truly leverage data to take decisions and how they engage data experts to identify strategic opportunities and not to simply document decisions that they have already taken. Third, this means that you need to position your data experts or data scientists as partners. Bring them in business reviews, let them make recommendations. This is how these data experts will build business acumen, how they will be able to speak the same language than the business and ultimately become trusted business partners. I am not covering here the technology dimension, but I still see this as a facilitator, of course, and Jacob will cover this in the next presentation. Next slide, please. So as a conclusion, I would like to share what I think should be the ambition of the FP&A function, keeping it simple. Earlier, Gary, you showed this cartoon highlighting how you can be overloaded by data. In my view, the FP&A function needs to help building simple, actionable scenarios based on rich data sets to help the business grow. I will close here for today, and I'm giving it to you for comments.
Nahuel, thank you so much for your great practical insights. Now I would like to ask our panelists to join in for quick commentaries. Gary, any commentaries after Nahuel's presentation?
What I liked most about Nahuel's presentation was sponsorship from top management. And I think the issue here is, leaders without followers are just taking a walk in the park. And I really believe that the best leaders and executives no longer basically have the best answers. They have the best questions. There's too much complexity. There's too much volatility. There's too much uncertainty for executives and leaders to rely on their gut feel or intuition or sixth sense or the types of decisions they made earlier in their career that successfully got them to be executives and promoted to the top. They need to create a culture of investigation and discovery and learning through questions and tolerance for making mistakes as long as you learn from those mistakes. So I think it's really key that leadership is so essential to basically successfully implement the FP&A methods.
Thank you, Gary. Definitely top sponsorship from the leadership. Jacob, your insights, quick insights after this presentation.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, Nahuel, very well done. I think in what you've kind of accomplished in the pandemic, I know you said that you were accelerating the process of moving to a data-driven system. But congratulations for getting as far as you did. I know you went through the pain, and even customers that I speak to, other FP&A groups, they have similar issues. The pandemic kind of brought the same kind of issues out. I love how you kind of hit on something really solid, where you started talking about how more people kind of have to be part of the process in order to make this successful. It's not just FP&A on our own. Data scientists have to come in, other groups, other companies and other countries had to provide data to kind of help you and aid in the process. This isn't a siloed event. This is kind of a group effort. So yeah, great stuff.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacob. And Nahuel, once again, thank you for this interesting presentation. Now this is the timing for us to hear from our participants. So panelists, if you can switch off your cameras, when I'm switching on the next following question, and it's about the setup of data management in your company. So how would you describe the data management process in your company? Who owns data management in your company? Can you start to choose only one option that is the best description? Is it finance? Is it IT? Is it a separate data management department? Or maybe each department has independent data work, or maybe it's already integrated data management throughout the whole organization. So please continue to vote. More than 50% of you voted just a few seconds. We are closing the poll and sharing the results. We are sharing the results, and Nahuel, your commentary is the first. So 35% of people, they have independent data work. Each department has their own data work. What is your commentary?
Yeah, I think this resonates a lot with what we traditionally see, meaning that the data is very much scattered with the different departments, and the functions that are generally stepping in are indeed IT and finance. So it's also calling my attention that only 10% are calling integrated data through the organization. So I think this is the investment to make. But again, even based on the survey that you shared a bit earlier, I think that that is quite common at the moment, and showing that there is still a lot of room for progress in this area.
Absolutely. From my side, I'm really excited to see that finance is responsible more and more for data management, 22%, almost a quarter, and IT still 26%. So thank you for your commentary. Thank you so much for those of you who voted. I'm hiding the results. And this is the timing now to look at the next presentation. And this is the role of technology in fostering data-driven culture. Jacob Joseph, Director Product Technology at Profix, is here with us. So Jacob, the stage is yours.
I've worked I've worked with FP&A groups for the last 13 years. Many companies buy products like Profix to try to eliminate some of the manual tasks or spend more time on their business strategy. They want to spend more time in analysis, but some companies don't get there. 10 years ago, I would have said that it was because of the technology. Working for a technology company, I would have said it's the technology's fault. But in today's world, technology should be really the least of your worries. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about kind of how technology fits with all of the changes you would have to make in order to become data-driven. Culture itself is the major piece, but even if everyone at your company says that they want to eliminate the bias and be data-driven, not applying a data strategy could lead to disaster. So even if you said, you know, we're all on board, we all want to use our data, without something like how you would secure the data, how it's going to be governed, who has access to it, how you're going to share it, could lead to trouble and a little bit of frustration down the road. So focusing on that technology part, technology can kind of help ease the pain in those specific areas, but trying to focus on it on its own will lead to some frustration. Instead of focusing on the technology, really focusing on the problem is the most ideal way to kind of bring technology into your company. Once that culture is set, once your data strategy is set. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about exactly what we do with not just in Profix, but most CPM companies, the roadblocks that you would hit each time you try to enable a data-driven culture, and how kind of technology helps you along the way. So to start leveraging your data, there's really a spectrum of processes that you'd have to go through, with the end goal being kind of at the very, very end, you want to get to prescriptive analytics, where the machine is kind of helping making recommendations on how you can kind of achieve your business strategy, or even help you kind of set the business strategy along the way. The biggest issue with business strategy is that it's unique to an individual business and it's based on your targets, but that's our goal. So if we assume that that's our goal, like how do we build up to that? Where do we start? And you could be at any point in this spectrum. You could be, you still have the data in siloed events where different departments aren't sharing with you. Or you might not even know the kind of data that you have, and you kind of have to pull out insights from within the data set you have. Or you might be ready to kind of use machine learning. So when I work with companies, or when we work with companies, a lot of the time, technology is the first thing. I get a lot of, I want to use machine learning, but that's not really the right question to ask. Kind of like along the same lines that Gary was talking about the data and questioning your data. If you're not solving a problem, there's no point in applying the technology. That's my philosophy for the most part. So once I was working with a large construction company who's from the US and Canada, and they wanted to predict their revenue based on their project length. And to predict the revenue, they really need to know, they said, we have lots of project data. We have 15 years of data to process. Can't you just come up with a trend and forecast this out into the future? But what they didn't realize, or what we didn't all realize together, was we actually had to figure out where they were today. So how do you line up your projects so that they're similar? If you're doing a large commercial building or a residential building, they're very different project types. You can't compare them together because you're comparing apples and oranges together. So in the process, when we're talking about getting started, siloing the data is one problem, visualizing your data is another. So we have things in our application around insights and providing insights automatically for you. If you were to try to do that manually, you kind of get stuck at scale. So if I have 100,000 SKUs and I'm trying to predict each one, doing a 5% increase year over year, everyone knows the SKUs don't perform in the same way across the globe in different regions. So we absolutely have to have a way of visualizing the data, but not just individually, not just for a single product, but at scale, right? And then try to identify, what's your 80% that gives you the most bang for your buck along the way. So even though we talk about this spectrum, we talk about where you could slot in, we talk about visualizing the data, everybody wants to automate the manual processes. I don't think there's anyone who likes to find out where my formula broke in my Excel spreadsheet, or who entered in 6 million instead of 600,000. Those aren't fun tasks. And that's actually a perfect spot where technology can come in and automate. And in today's day and age, these tools, you don't have to be a coder to do it. My philosophy on technology is, instead of forcing people to code and making it really complicated, why don't we hide a lot of the complexity and have the machine kind of do the heavy lifting for us? So once you have kind of that baseline, you've broken down your silos, you know exactly what data you have, you've automated the manual stuff, you're probably then ready to start applying things like statistical models and machine learning, because now you can start forecasting on a more continuous basis, where it's not so painful. You don't have to use a workflow and go and force people to give you their spreadsheets, and in the end, they just gave you the same value as last year. That's the kind of stuff that we're trying to eliminate. But none of that statistical methods and machine learning will help you if you don't have the right data in its place. So on the next slide, I think the one thing that we want to kind of reposition ourselves, it doesn't matter what kind of company you have, everyone's essentially a technology company. What the pandemic has done, it's accelerated a lot of the need to use the data for decision making, because you need to be able to quickly turn around your decisions based on new assumptions, like within your business or within your market. So no matter where you are in the process, if you're not doing this, your competitors are likely doing something similar, where they're trying to get their data together, trying to build these predictive models in an automated, repeatable fashion. So you already have data that you leverage. So let's say you're a startup, or if you're a company that's been around for 10 years, you have some data that you can make. You're either on two ends of the spectrum. Either you have data that you can manage and that you want to use, or you have lots of data and you're overrun with data. There's kind of two aspects there. So if you don't think you have enough data, or you don't have the right data, there is some nuggets there. It might take some time and effort. You may have to build up the skill set in order to kind of uncover those details. But that's where technology comes in to help you to clean and format and analyze the data, so that you don't have to do that manually. This is kind of a one-time thing, and then it's repeatable at that point, as long as your business assumptions don't change too drastically. But in any scenario, our data scientists tell us this all the time. If you have garbage in, you're going to get garbage coming out. So it doesn't matter how much data you have, it's actually the quality of your data that's the most important part. So when we look at how you can use your data, like cloud technology kind of got to a point where the data tools are now more accessible. You don't necessarily need to know coding. You don't have to be a full stack developer in order to create predictive models. There are more user interface driven technologies in order to allow you to analyze your data. And it's a lot less expensive for you to save your data. So in the past, if you had to kind of cut off your data because it was too old and you didn't have a place to store it, or if you stored it on disk and your disks fail and you lose all of your data, maybe it's time to consider moving your information into the cloud, into a single source of truth. And that could be anything. It could be in AWS, it could be in Azure. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you have the data where at some point, these algorithms that we're using, like big companies are using them today, and almost all of us will have access to it at some point in time. You want to have the data in order to support it. You want to be ready for when those systems kind of come into play. Next slide, please. So where do we leave off at the very end here for all of that process that I talked about? You know, what are some really specific things that I can kind of leave with you in order for you to move to a data-driven culture, or to adjust or support your data-driven culture? Really start with that data strategy, because that will kind of give you the roadmap for what you need in order to accomplish becoming a data-driven company, to make sure everyone's on board, to keep kind of the unity across your internal teams. And you don't necessarily need to do big bang everything. You don't have to start with 100% of all of your product lines if you're a manufacturing companies, or if you're in healthcare, it doesn't have to be every service that you offer. You can start small, try to go for a quick win, because like Noel in his presentation, once the stakeholders actually saw, had a visual representation of what the results were, when they could actually apply their usage, they absolutely had to, once they started using it, then they saw the value, then they started asking for more, I'm sure. And it just builds from there. You kind of get iterative and it snowballs. And then you can kind of establish your data-driven culture. If you focus on your business, focus on your strategy, those key drivers, and try to use technology to identify those key drivers, like anomaly detection, like sensitivity analysis. If you're running this locally on your machine, it becomes very, very difficult. But if you're doing this in the cloud, you have unlimited power kind of at your leverage. You should leverage cloud technology when it makes sense. I know that cloud is not for everyone. There's some security aspects. There's some, you know, how am I going to ensure that my users are spending enough in the cloud, or we're trying to address the spending. All of that's valid, but the cloud technology is there if and when you need it. And the last point I want to leave is, if you're trying to augment your team, you're really in a great position. You're not trying to replace them. For those that can predict really, really well, you want to keep them and just augment them with a lot less bias around them. So yeah, I'm open for comments and questions from the panel now.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Interesting insights from a technology point of view. Very quick commentaries from Gary and Nahuel before we go to Q&A. And just a quick reminder, please continue to send your questions via text box. Even if we don't have enough time to answer all of them, we will get back to you through email. Thanks again. And Gary, very quick commentary from your side, please.
What resonated with me in this slide is the middle one at the top. Start small, think big. I think a problem is most organizations overplan but under execute. And they take way too much time, and then they think that it has to be huge systems, very complex, like activity-based costing, 3,000 drivers and activities and so forth. There are techniques, and I use them. They're kind of in the area of pilot programs or proof of concept. It's called rapid prototyping with iterative remodeling. You know, you build the first model in just a day or two with a few people in the room, you share it with others, and light bulbs go on with everybody. And a couple of iterations, you've got a permanent repeatable production system, ABC system in 3 weeks, balanced scorecard, strategy map, 2 days. People can contact me if you want to know how to do that. So I think working backwards with the end in mind, knowing what the problem is, as Jacob just described, is really the key.
Thank you so much, Gary. And Nahuel, your quick commentary, please.
Sure. So, Jacob, I really like that you highlighted very clearly that technology is only one piece of the puzzle. I think very often I see business cases where technology is presented as the solution that will solve it all. And that can be a bit misleading. On the other hand, I fully agree with you, given the amount of data that we need to digest, that we need to analyze. Technology is more than needed now. It brings efficiencies and visualization, automation, machine learning. That's the dream to me. And I like as well that you clearly stated that you first need to have clean data to be able to get there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Jacob, for excellent presentation. We're about to start a Q&A session. But before this, let me remind you of the key takeaways from this session. So it's all about data-driven FP&A, and we looked at this subject from the 3 different sides, from the point of view of analytics thought leader, from the point of view of practitioner, and from the point of view of technology. Let us start with Q&A sessions right now. Please continue to send your questions right now. Gary, the first question is to you. And the question is about connection of ABC and data-driven planning. So data-driven model and ABC, what is the connection and how you can use both methods to improve data-driven FP&A culture?
Well, as I mentioned, activity-based costing primarily started basically looking through the rearview mirror. Was what our true profits last month, last quarter, and so forth, gave you much more accuracy, so you get better decisions. But when we go to the predictive view, where the future's coming at us, you know, and now we need to move not just to driver-based budgeting, but driver-based rolling financial forecasts, because the budget's out of date in a couple of months. We really need those unit level cost consumption rates, which are calibrated in the strategic view in the past to basically do the planning, if you will, almost net cash flow. And Nahuel keeps bringing up validly, COVID has really caused concern with board of directors. They want to know net cash flow. Is my company going to go bankrupt? And that's basically the way you do it. You do it through driver-based rolling financial forecasts.
Thank you, Gary. Excellent answer. Nahuel, the next question is to you. Thank you for sharing great practical examples. Do you have further insights on how to position data scientists to also to be an effective business partner and storyteller? Very often we see them as separate roles with different skill sets.
No, exactly. I think that's a very common challenge. Personally, what I have seen very effective is simply to have data scientists and data experts invited to business reviews and to business meetings, and to be really there to give their perspective, and not just to provide data or insights before the meetings to prepare the meetings, but to be really there to see how leaders are also discussing it, what kind of conclusions they make, and being able to react live. That's what I have seen lately as a game changer. But I have to admit there is a lot of resistance to this, and it's not always happening naturally. So this is definitely something to force. And again, to me, that this is one of the main changes that organizations will have to embrace to really make the most out of data. We need to give more space to data scientists and treat them really as partners.
Thank you, Nahuel. Jacob, the next question is to you. Can you please elaborate more on data strategy? I feel it has tremendous potential to get the right results from predictive analytics. What is your view?
Sure. So data strategy in itself, you can kind of break it down into a couple different aspects, but the most important part is around where is your data actually going to reside? Like that's the very first question that in any kind of data strategy that you would set up. If you're saying, well, we're going to go and purchase a bunch of computers and servers and keep everything on-prem, that's the very first gate that you have to go through, whether it's that or if you're going to go to cloud. That's the initial kind of, okay, well, what are we going to do with our data? The next is, okay, well, let's do an inventory of all the data that we have, and then who should have access within each of the groups. Those are the two aspects of the data strategy that are kind of the most important in order to get started, because once it's set in place, once the head of every group understands kind of what the data is for, who is going to access it, then you can kind of start getting everyone to think about, okay, well, how can I use data in my own group, or how can I contribute to the process? So what you're trying to do is build yourself a roadmap to say, hey, here's how much data we have, here's where the data is going to be, here's how we're going to leverage it today. By the way, here's how we think we're going to leverage it in the future. And I think that's kind of the thoughts around data strategy, and that's where we want to start at the very, very beginning.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacob. And this is the last question, and we need a very quick 30 seconds answers from you. So the question is to all of you, and please can you build on the answers of the previous person. So how we can bring data to FP&A? What would be your 1 or 2 key steps to do this? So if we can start from you, Gary. So your 1, 2 steps, 30 seconds, please.
Work backwards with the end in mind. Know the problem or opportunity that you want to investigate. Harness the power of advanced analytics. And I know many of the people took analytics, regression, correlation in college. They just wanted a passing grade. Get out of there. Sorry, it's here. So you really need skill sets in your organization that have the capability to do that kind of advanced analytical work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And your 1 or 2 steps, Nahuel?
I would say, echoing the presentation of Jacob, that you need to start small and simple. Make sure that you have a couple of strong points that you can make based on data, and build from there.
Excellent. Thank you, Nahuel. And Jacob, your last 1 or 2 steps, please.
Sure. Even once you have kind of everyone in line, once you set it up, that skill set of managing the data, kind of like what Gary was talking about, you kind of have to decide if you're going to build that up internally or if you're going to go out and kind of obtain that. Data scientists are kind of at a premium right now. Getting that skill set is not an easy thing. So you really have to think, okay, well, are we going to invest in people, training our current people to turn them into something equivalent of a data scientist, or are we going to go and partner with somebody else?
Excellent. Thank you so much for your answers. And this is I'm concluding Q&A session, but I see that more and more questions are coming. Please continue to send your questions and we will distribute them between our panelists, and we will get back to you. And just a few closing slides, some information, upcoming meetings before we say goodbye to everyone. But please, can you stay with us? Because we would like you to participate at the survey in order for us to understand what is the feedback and how we can do better. So very soon we will have another FP&A Trends webinar, and the subject is continuous planning. So please join us. The link is here. Then Digital North American FP&A board about integrated FP&A strategy, steps, and examples. Please join us as well. Finally, thank you so much to our sponsor, Profix, for being our sponsor. Thank you so much for supporting us. I would like to say thank you so much to all our participants from so many countries around the globe. Please share with us your insights. Please continue to share your thought leadership and articles and case studies. We are here to you in order to share this information with the globe. And finally, I would like to say thank you so much to our fantastic panel. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your insights. Gary, thank you so much. Nahuel, Jacob, we will start to travel very soon, and I hope to meet with you in person very soon. And let us stay connected. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great day or evening or morning. Bye.